Hello, everyone. People are just filtering in. So, as they do, I'll just do some housekeeping and say a very, very big welcome. And it's nice to see you. Um, we are coming together today for a think tank, which hopefully you know because you've all signed up. But just as a reminder, today's session is being recorded. So this recording will go up on our YouTube within 2 weeks and it will live in our online archive of resources for teaching artists. So we've been doing think tanks for years and years and years, and every single one of them is up online. It's just a reminder though, because then what we share in the space is recorded and put up on that for revisiting. So if anything comes up that you feel you'd rather not have in it, let us know afterwards, or just have that in mind while you're on camera and while you're sharing. Today's session will be in English, but we are an international network, so we're conscious that's not likely to be everyone on the call's first language. For that reason, we do ask you to speak slowly, and please don't be offended if we ask you to repeat yourself at any point. But you are also really, really welcome to use the chat if you'd rather, if that's more comfortable to contribute that way, you're welcome. These sessions happen monthly. They are open platforms for anyone in our network who has a piece of practice they'd like to share, a concept, something we want to think through together as a community. If you have a session you'd like to run, please just get in touch. We are programmed now through until September, but after that, you're very welcome to propose a session. If you have the beginnings of something, we also can work with you on turning it into a session if you're more at the beginning of what it is to present. If at any point we get cut off from the call today, don't panic. I will just restart the Zoom. It'll be the same link and we'll just pick back up where we left off. I can see a lot of you have cameras on already, so thank you for that. You do not have to have your camera on, obviously, but as we all know as teaching artists, it's really nice to see people's faces while you're talking so you can see if what you're saying is landing or not. So if you're able, please do feel, and you feel comfortable, please do keep them on. And this is one of 3 sessions we are doing called Spotlight on Scotland. As the longer term ITAC members will know, sometimes we have series about specific global regions or specific areas of practice. You can maybe hear from my accent, I am based in Scotland, and so this one is very close to my heart and I'm very happy to be presenting it. And since the session is 90 minutes, if you need to get up and move around, if you need to wiggle about a bit while the session's happening, please feel free to do that. It's all very informal. People will keep filing in while we get through the next few minutes. But for the moment, if you want to pop where you're from and a quick hello in the chat, I think it would be lovely to hear from you. And with that being said, I think that's everything from me. A quick plug, a reminder that ITAC 8 is happening in August. If you are around, we have conferences every 2 years. This one is in Europe, so it is close to me this time. And I'll put a link in the chat where you can find your tickets. It's a few hundred teaching artists from all over the world come together to share practice for 3 days. So this one's in Antwerp at the end of August, and it'd be lovely to see you there. So with that being said, I will hand over to Chrissy just to give a little bit more framing about today and about the partnership with Creative Scotland and ITAC that's led to this series of think tanks. Chrissy.
Hi, folks. I'm Chrissy Ruckley from the Place Partnerships and Communities team at Creative Scotland, and we are really excited to be partnering with ITAC for this Spotlight on Scotland series. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes giving a bit of background around Creative Scotland. So I'm not going to talk for very long, and I can see that we've got people like from Atlas and Cove Park and stuff in the room, so forgive me for covering stuff you already know. The point of these sessions is really to give a platform to the amazing artists and work that is going on in Scotland. So Creative Scotland, inclusive of Screen Scotland, is the public body that supports the arts, screen and creative industries across all parts of Scotland. Essentially, we are the Arts Council of Scotland for Scotland. We distribute funding from the Scottish Government and the National Lottery, support the arts, culture and creativity in Scotland as a development organisation, a funder, an advocate, and an influencer. So our strategic priorities running through all our work are climate, equalities, diversity, inclusion, international, and fair work. So you'll see that our work aligns well with the mission of ITAC, and we support teaching artistry or community engaged arts in many ways. For example, we provide three-year funding for 262 organisations across Scotland, many of whom work with schools, communities and local residents, and that is ongoing funding. We also have open funding that organisations and individuals can apply to throughout the year, and Emma's work, A Play for Torry, was funded through open funding. So our team in Place Partnerships and Communities does a lot of development work and works closely with places and communities through programs like the Place Partnership Programme and Culture Collective. And we've also, I know, got at least one, possibly two members of our team on the call. Culture Collective supports artists and organisations across Scotland to work with communities to shape their own cultural lives and opportunities. We've also got a creative learning and young persons team at Creative Scotland, covering areas such as the rights of the child and delivering programmes like youth music and open funds for youth-led projects. So that's a little bit of background as to Creative Scotland and what we do, but I'm now pleased to hand over to the amazing artist who is hosting this spotlight. So you can take it from here, Emer Morris.
Hi, thanks Chrissy, thanks Madeline. Hi everyone, nice to see your faces. I hope those calling in from the UK are keeping cool and across Europe and wherever you are. This session is going to be quite conversational and interactive, and it's really quite a practice sharing opportunity. I'm also going to be co-hosted here with Scott, who I will let introduce himself. But yeah, I'm Emer. I'm an artist and strategist, and I am one of the co-founders of A Play for Torry, a lead artist of A Play for Torry. Today we'll be presenting and chatting, and we'll be using the Zoom chat and a little bit of spoken reflection, and doing a couple little breakout moments as well, one in pairs and then one smaller kind of group discussion as well. Feel free to use the chat or also participate vocally. There's a number of us, which means that's kind of possible to do today. So that's great. Scott, do you want to just introduce yourself briefly?
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Scott Hurrett, and as Emer said, I'm the co-founder of Play for Torry, and I guess we can talk a little bit about that later, about how it was founded, the idea. But I'm joining you from Torry. That's where I live. It's my home. And I also work for Friends of the Earth Scotland, who are one of the partners in the play as well. And Friends of the Earth Scotland is an environmental organisation based in Scotland. And so, that's my introduction.
Great. Thanks. And then people have put a little bit in already, but it'd be really nice to either hear or write in the chat if people just want to jump in with your name and where you're calling in from and a community that you're part of or working with. Just quite briefly, just to hear that. Does anyone want to jump in with a vocal? If not, I can read some out from the chat. I'll read some out from the chat. We've got Robin joining from Portree on Sky, and Anne from Biddeford. I'm sorry if I'm going to say it, in Maine, in the US. Sorry, Anne. You can correct me later. I can see you chuckling.
Oh, that's right.
Is it? Oh, great. Catherine from Atlas Arts, also in Sky. And we got Chrissy and Emma from Cove Park in Argyll. Great. Thank you. Great. And obviously we've got Madeline calling in from Edinburgh. I'm usually based in Glasgow, between Glasgow and Aberdeen. I'm also currently further south in the midst of the heatwave. Great. Oh, and here we go. Katrine from the US, working with Sci Arts Exchange and Will Trap Early Learning, also Turnip Ensemble Theatre. Brilliant. Thank you so much for being here. I'm just going to share my screen. One second. Are you all getting that?
Yes.
Super. Great. So this was the question which was framing this session today. And yeah, I guess the prompt for us in this is also what we as artists can do ethically, creatively, and politically when a community is living through a major change, and what's our roles and responsibilities in that. And so we're first off, Scott and I are just going to talk a little bit about A Play for Torry. First off, talk about where Torry is. Scott, do you want to kick off?
Yeah, so Torry is part of Aberdeen. So for those outside of Scotland, Aberdeen is sort of in the northeast bit of Scotland, along the North Sea. So and Torry was actually its own place, if you like. It was actually separate from the city like 200-300 years ago. So I guess from that, it does have its own identity and character, which probably still rings true now. And it's also separated from the rest of Aberdeen by a river. And so in the photograph, or this is a photograph of a painting called The View of Aberdeen, which is displayed in Aberdeen Art Gallery. And so Torry is in the foreground, or what Torry was, say, I think 200 years ago when this was painted. And Aberdeen is in the background on the other side of the river. So, and as you can see, the sea, so Aberdeen and Torry itself is shaped by the sea. A lot of the industry that Torry and Aberdeen grew up with is often associated with the sea. So you had like whale fishing, boat building, and then more recently you had fishing itself. So Aberdeen was one of the biggest fishing ports, or the biggest fishing port in Scotland, indeed in the UK. And then more recently, in the 60s and early 70s, oil was discovered in the North Sea, and Aberdeen became sort of the main base in which to service the offshore platforms which were getting constructed and built in terms of like the personnel. And so often Aberdeen gets called, or has been called, and still is called to some degree, the oil and gas capital of Europe. So that's like a thing that it identifies with. And the other thing which Aberdeen is actually quite well known, probably more known actually, is in terms of its granite. So it's known as the Granite City or the Silver City because a lot of the buildings are in grey granite, which looks grey when the haar's in and when it's overcast, but when the sun's out, it sparkles and it's really nice. So that's a little bit about Aberdeen. But Torry, just a little bit more history about Torry. So, as I said, the just seen the picture change, so that's like threw me slightly. But yeah, so Torry itself, as I say, it's slightly separate to Aberdeen. So Torry is, I guess, often could be described as like a predominantly working class community. So it's quite a diverse community as well. And since the oil came in the 60s and 70s, industry and industrial estates have been sort of built up around Torry. And then also in the early 70s, a part of what was called Old Torry got demolished to make way to to increase the harbour site, the harbour development, to then which would then be the land would then be used to service the oil and gas industry. So that happened in the 60s, and then since then, most of Torry itself has been surrounded by industrial estates, which a lot of them are to service the oil and gas industry. And then more recent memory, in more recent times, a sewage treatment work was built on the edge of Torry, which takes basically sewage and waste from the rest of Aberdeenshire and Aberdeen, so that's the wider region. On the south of Torry, we had a beach, a cove, a natural cove, which was quite in 100 years ago. That was like where a lot of people in Aberdeen used to go when to access the sea, and then that got turned into an industrial harbour that opened about 3 or 4 years ago. And then with also Torry is a site on the southern edge is a site of a waste incinerator, which takes the waste again from the wider northeast region, not just Aberdeen, to an incinerator for it to be burnt. And that is just like a few hundred yards away from a local primary school. So these are things which have happened in Torry, which at certain points there's been like a community resistance to these things happening in Torry, and what I guess the play, that's the sort of the context in which the play was made. But what we was really keen to do is try to tell, not just tell or look at all these bad things which have happened in this community or to the community, but we really wanted to tell the stories of people who perhaps were resisting those things from happening. And so I'll leave it there in terms of the context, if you like.
Thanks, Scott. Yeah, I think that's really great. And just to say that picture before was of St Fittick's Park, which is very central in terms of being a very current, a very live struggle for the community in Torry, because of plans and actions to bulldoze part of the park and concrete over it and build some industrial units for purposes to do with potentially moving towards net zero, but taking away the park. And the campaign which Scott has been very involved with around resisting that, and for people to hold on to their last freely accessible green space. I guess what all of this kind of leads to is that the play looks at and has as a question that underlines it is who pays the price for this transition. And as Scott said, there's also people in Scotland will be familiar, and in the UK will be familiar with the RAC housing crisis, as well as in RAC being this reinforced aerated auto concrete. That's not, I probably said it wrong, but
not dodgy concrete.
Dodgy concrete. Thanks, Scott. And which 500 houses in Torry were found to have this concrete, and people were moved out very short notice if they were in council homes, and then people were stuck there if they were homeowners, but told that they were having compulsory purchase orders and that their homes were going to be demolished. So one of the many aspects of the kind of issues going on in Torry, and these issues are obviously clearly complex, and a multitude of them, and they encompass, like as we've said, like housing, land, local democracy, climate transition, class, race. So for us, the thing about making a play wasn't about making a symbol of Torry, but was thinking about how all of the complexities of those elements, how we can make those things be more human and more embodied, and more emotionally connecting. And in making the work, we worked with a range of people, and whether that's people involved in the park campaign, people involved with some of these different issues affecting them, from local government to housing, but local residents and artists, people involved in heritage groups, people involved in different industry. And we wanted the kind of multiplicity of those truths to be able to sit alongside each other without having to be perfect, because obviously it can't be, right? So that's kind of an important aspect for us of making this into a theatre piece. And theatre for us was a useful form in terms of the space it creates for that grief and for joy, and for the humour, and making room for those feelings, which is something that feels often missing from how working class and marginalised communities are often represented. This work also sits in a lineage of the Cheviot, the stag, the black oil, people who might know that in a kind of UK and Scottish context. But yeah, quite it's sitting in a celebratory, community-led practice of work. We try to not oversimplify things. And also an important tenet of this work was also enabling people to recognize themselves beyond how they are often portrayed as victims. But as protagonists, and as experts, as witnesses, as culture bearers, as performers, and as makers of meaning. Obviously, as we're talking about this as well, it's not a perfect case study, but I think it's hopefully it'll be interesting to kind of explore. The question kind of framing for us was around less just how do we make a play about Torry, but also how do we make something that Torry recognizes, that it challenges, that it also owns, people own in themselves, and that people can use. Here is our poster.
I was going to just say, Emer, on that point about people recognizing themselves, not just in terms of how they perhaps would identify in relation to these issues. And so Anne has said in the chat about that they lived in a city that had a municipal incinerator, and a group was able to organise and fight back, and now it's a cell phone tower. And I think that sort of fighting back is so all through these, it's like it's quite a sorry episode of all these things which have happened in Torry, and there has been resistance, and a lot of the things which people have done in the past have actually failed to stop the thing which is going to be built, like the harbour, like the incinerator. But I think it's in what I see the play doing, or has done, is to tell some of those stories of people resisting, but to show actually it sort of matters. It mattered that they did that, and I don't know, for me, in a way that helps in terms of motivating people for the future in a way. So even though things were lost, it means it does matter, because there's a whole play been made about it, and so that might inspire people for the future as well to continue trying to care and for the place that they live.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. Great. We're going to do a little breakout. Just a kind of like five minutes ish one, just in pairs. Madeline's going to pop you into breakout groups, and that's just for you to share with each other a community that you're part of or that you work with, and what change or pressure or transition are you facing and currently navigating. So just sharing that with each other, and then when we come back, people can just pop something in the chat. But yeah, ready.
Okay, I'm going to send you all to breakout rooms now. If anyone doesn't see the invitation, please let me know, and I can just manually pop you into a room. If you're on your phone and it's tricky, just let me know. Otherwise, you should be good to go.
You're on mute, Emer.
Hello. Thanks, Scott. Welcome back, everyone. Yeah, it would be great if people would just pop something in the chat. Could be a word, it could be a phrase, could be something that just came up for them then in that conversation, just to share, to hear back from it. And we'll read some of them out loud. Great. Strength in story sharing. Thank you, Catherine. Happy for time to connect. Lack of community cohesion. We chatted about art, school, graves, wind farms and oil and gas, and when the council votes with community and planning decisions. I covered a lot. Great. Lovely. Scott, you can just keep a little eye on if other things come in there, and I'm just going to share the screen again.
Yeah, I can just talk a little bit what Katrin talked about, because Katrin's currently cooking dinner, so maybe busy in terms of cat type. So yeah, Katrin is in Texas and was talking about it's on the Gulf of Mexico and how that is creating issues in terms of the land, that sometimes from flooding, like from storms, but also some of the land is actually sinking from the amount of building which is happening. So
okay, thank you. Okay, thank you, everyone. That was really nice to have that moment of connection. So appreciated that. We're going to talk a little bit about the practice now, like a bit some of the process of making a play for Torry. Yeah, and just to say as well, there will be time for us to like have a dialogue, which called like chat at the end as well. But we'll just run through some of these things right now. So yeah, I mean, a key thing for us was that the process was not separated from the politics of the work. So I guess how we listened and who we listened to shaped the material as well. So obviously, as a lot of these processes, and everyone I'm sure on this call knows, if they're involved in this sort of work, it's like listening and relationship building. There's like the kind of a core tenement and starting place for us. Scott is leaving. Scott is closing the door. Scott is resident in Torry. I'm not, but as co-founders. So Scott is obviously already holding some of these existing relationships that we started in the process of having conversations about the play. And for me, that was a case of then building those relationships, but with a kind of obviously a head start of working closely with Scott, and Scott and I had already worked together separately on something else, and when we started the play. I think an important thing I'd like to say about that is that that was like relationship building over a period of time for both of us, and for me as the artist, not just in recording interviews, but there's listening and relationship building happening on walks, in meetings, in conversations, campaign spaces, cups of tea, and through staying in that kind of relationship over time, we worked through interviews and gathering testimony and local knowledge. which again, I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with on this call, but I think, there's definitely the important, the tenement that always sticks with me about that is the trust that people put in you, that with the parts of their lives and their experience and their history, particularly with such live things like the issues and campaigns that we're working with in Torry. Also, we ran a series of workshops in the development of this piece over a series of years, and things we kept coming back to, and that was with young people and with adults locally, working with residents and campaigners and community performers and artists. And these were very much not as consultation, but they were very much like part of the making. They also helped us find the rhythm and the humor, and the kind of emotional truth of the piece. So yeah, they were fundamental kind of parts, and that includes also a kind of dialogical process and collaborative process of bringing when we got to the point of having a script, of taking that back to the community. Yeah, and I'd say a part of our process, once we'd gathered and done this huge gathering process, is myself and co-writers, Shane Strachan and May Dan Sangu, went away and shaped this into a script, or shaped this into a piece of theatre, which obviously in itself holds a lot of questions around power that we're going to come to, but yeah, I think it's worth noting as well. Again, we're all aware, real stories do not automatically mean good theatre, but also making choices about character and structure and rhythm, and how we keep the politics absolutely central, but also making holding a narrative truth to making an art form. So the question was more was important that how we make those choices with care, rather than pretending that we weren't making those choices at all. And that speaks to the next point about sort of balancing artistic ambition with responsibility. So a key value that we set out from the beginning of co-founding this project was that community-led work doesn't mean it should be artistically timid in any way. And we really wanted the play to be bold and moving and funny and theatrically alive and formally alive. But also, not at the ambition couldn't be overtaken at the expense of care for people involved in this process. So yeah, we repeatedly asked who holds power, authorship and decision making. And yeah, we also wanted to own our decisions. So our authorship as theatre makers, for us, being accountable does not mean having no authorship. It meant very much being honest about the authorship that we do have and the choices that we were making. Yeah, and this is a picture from the show that we did in January, one of the shows in January. And I would say that when the show opened, if anything, those performances create new possibilities and new responsibilities, because as we think about how it's responded to now, currently, and also as we move forward into touring, how the work raises new questions about place and context and responsibility. It's really important for us. So these are some of the kind of questions that are guiding our working with principles. Who gets to tell the story? Who is the work for? who has the power to say that doesn't feel right? How do we work with communities without extracting from them? Move on there. Great. I'm going to just go back one just because before it is. Scott, is there anything you want to add before you?
Yeah, I was going to say that I wasn't like a writer on the play, but I did go to the writing like weekends we had in the writing sessions with Shane, May, and Emer. And some of the interesting discussions about is like we through all the chats, cups of teas, workshops, we amassed so much material in terms of people's words, and it's like how you decide. I was fascinated to see how you decide what to include and what not to include. And so in many ways there's some things which is very easy to include, but then in some aspects of what people say is hard to include, and if you don't include that, then there's questions of, well, what is it you're trying to represent? So for example, people like in conversations we've had, people may have expressed sort of quite problematic views like to ourselves, like something like on immigration or something like that, and it's like how do you include that in the play somehow without actually amplifying perhaps the problematic aspect, so at least everyone can recognize something within the play that is true to an extent without. So there's sort of these really sometimes difficult and complex decisions to be made, and I think, and that's what we had to navigate. So I just wanted to say that as an example.
Thank you, and I think that speaks very much to what we're going to talk about now. But yeah, the kind of exactly that point of like the trickiness of where you go into of how you navigate the dual responsibility towards the artwork and also your own also the justice and the values of the project as well. So we wanted to talk a bit now about the current context in which we're making work, right? As this session is called, Can We Really Sing in These Dark Times? Like we're at this, we wanted to kind of explore how artists navigate a context where community justice-led work is often dismissed as woke, earnest, preachy, parachutey, and also that to acknowledge that the far right is gaining ground across the UK and across Europe, and that affects the conditions in which artists, communities, and cultural organisations and institutions are making work. So we're just going to lay out some questions, and then we'll kind of have a bit of a conversation, because I think this is obviously, none of this is news to anyone on this call, and it's definitely stuff that we were thinking about. So how do we keep doing justice orientated work without becoming defensive or simplistic? How do artists avoid parachuting in, especially when working with communities under pressure? How do we stay rooted in relationship, humour, care, and specificity rather than slogans? And how can we be generous and accessible without becoming bland or depoliticized? We're going to go into a little breakout in a minute, but Scott, should we speak a little bit to any of this for Play for Torry?
Yeah. I guess this is just my own view on art, and obviously informed of what we try to do, and I'm going to try to put words into my thoughts. So I think, like, obviously I can only really speak of the UK context, the political context, but I can imagine that's mirrored in lots of other places in terms of the sort of rise in more sort of right-wing sentiment, and what does that mean in terms of making art. And and so for me, art is the best art has always been art which is not spoon fed me of how to think, but actually is allowed to me, like, I don't know, broaden my thinking about particular issues. And I suppose when you're making art in terms of what we've tried to do with the play and trying to sort of send it, which is just disorientated, which is itself is a very political issue. It's like in the current context where there's heightened scrutiny, I guess, on that sort of thing. Uh, it's how you tread that line of not being true to the work, true to the context, true to your own values, but at the same time not be overly sort of didactic or to tell people how to think. And I think that's always been an issue in making art. I'm not an art historian, but I can imagine it sort of has in this type of art. But it feels like right now there's a lot more scrutiny and scrutiny with people who potentially will have power to actually decide whether something gets funded or not, and in the future that is. And so I think it's a sort of tricky time. So I guess that's what was trying to sort of gather these questions and to hear what other people's thoughts were. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I just like to add that I think for on a play for Torry, I think us sitting, obviously sitting in some of the complexity, because it's which you can't help but do in this particular instance because of the complexity of issues that are going on, and remaining, I think remaining quite very live and very relational in terms of the work living with in relationship to people who've been involved in the process over a period of time, has been something that's been has been really important in this context. I think we had a lot of tricky conversations, or like good conversations, about how to be, where this question about your own authorship comes in, around being generous and accessible, and not acknowledging that there is difficult views out there, but without having to how you frame that within an artistic piece of work without condoning it, because I think a risk can often be a alienation of audiences if they think that you're living in a dream world when you're making an act to represent people's realistic experience as well. I think let's go to do the small group breakout for let's say 10 minutes. And so this is just a small group chat to kind of just chat with each other about what is one tension, criticism, or responsibility you've had to navigate in your community-engaged, community-based work. So some further prompts to kind of just think about in that might be, what has happened? Have you been seen as too political or too earnest or not political enough? How do you respond to the criticism, whether it's fair or when you see it as in bad faith, or decide to shut something down? Just as some additional prompts. And then, so we'll have a little breakout to chat about that and then come back together.
Okay, I'll pop you into your rooms now, and you'll have 8 minutes, did we say? 9 minutes?
9 minutes.
9 minutes. Okay, if anyone has any issues, let me know. Those rooms should be open for you now.
Hello, welcome back. Oh, I hope those conversations were fruitful as ours were. Yeah, maybe if people want to just like put something in the chat, obviously if anyone wants to say anything, to give a verbal response, please do. But otherwise, put something in the chat. That could just be like a word or a phrase or a question that came up from that for you. I'll just take a minute. Great. We've got Madeline popped in complexity of identity, and we've got supporting quieter voices, working with echo chambers, the importance of funders taking risks. So important, right? We have from Emma, we had a very interesting conversation about how to engage young people in community issues. The thing I just jotted down, not realizing the politics, which doesn't seem to make very much sense, but it was part of the conversation about how both art and politics can sometimes be hidden in a history or an understanding or an issue or a thing without people consciously realizing. As actually people are actually engaging in art when they don't realize that they are, or they're engaging in politics when they don't quite realize that they are. Yeah, anyone else?
Emma and I, as Emma said, we talked the challenges of engaging with young people, like sort of teenagers, around issues of place and around like and I suppose trying to get young people actively engaged in thinking about how they care for a place or even protect a place. And so Emma was talking about her experiences at Cove Park, trying to get a youth group off the ground, and I sort of mentioned about our work with the young, Big Noise Torry in terms of the play and how that wasn't necessarily exactly how we expected it to go in terms of we did a series of workshops over 4 weeks or 5 weeks with the ultimate aim of getting some music or soundtrack, which we did, but to get there wasn't, I suppose, the trajectory we thought, where we thought we'd go there and get them to talk about Torry and what they care about, what they don't care about, and the issues. And so when we did that, it was a struggle. I think it's, to be fair to be said, to get them to talk about that explicitly, but in the end they did. But it was actually more through so them playing around or even messing about with some of the things that we brought, where and then we got some quite rich stuff from it, but it wasn't straightforward. I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, thanks. That makes me like speaks to, I think, and there's been plenty of examples for that in the process of making a play for Torry, where we might have designed a bit of a process for some purpose, and absolutely that does not produce what we think it might, but it produces obviously something totally new and wonderful. We always knew, for example, separately, like that members of the community would continue to be involved in the process throughout, but we didn't, when we set out, know that we would have, for the performances in Torry, 5 community performers on stage alongside 5 professional actors. But that became clear throughout the process that was what people wanted to do, and seemed right. So yeah, it's kind of, I think there's a something really nice there, I guess, a principle about the role of um uh the looseness with which as makers we have to hold things in order to create the collaboration, the artistic collaboration with people that we're working with, and to allow it to develop in ways that we might not expect as well. Lovely. All right. Well, thank you so much. So I'm just gonna share this screen because it's quite a nice screen to share. Hang on. You've already seen it, but here you go. Yeah. This is a picture from St. Fittick's Park. Um, but yeah, this is really a opportunity really for a bit more of a conversation, and any kind of questions you might have. If we might have talked and I might have talked and not talked about the thing that you actually were interested in hearing about from this project, or if there's just an issue that's come up in the conversations that you'd like to share. Yeah, if anyone's got a question or anything, it's just we've got a few minutes just to have the chat. I've got yeah, go ahead, Robin.
I just have a quick question, maybe for Scott, but I know that there's obviously still, you've talked about so much community activity and activism happening in Torry, and I wondered if you could give us an update as to how things are going now. Like, what are the current challenges that the community is facing, or what's happening with St. Fittick's Park?
Yeah, I will be try to be as brief as possible because I could go on for a long time. So I think actually just I'll come on to the park, but the rack houses is probably the most dramatic thing at the moment. What's going to happen? So the rack was just to briefly use this dodgy concrete found in these houses, and the council it was a cheaper option was to demolish the houses as opposed to try to repair the houses, and so the homeowners and the tenants and I think they've all left the houses now, and so there's going to be 500 houses which are going to be demolished, and so there's going to be a whole swathe of Torry, which is going to just be essentially a demolition site. I've had like letters through my letterbox, so and it's unlikely that new houses will be built for some years. So it's quite bleak, and there's a whole bit of the heart of the community which is going to be demolished. In I suppose more optimistic news is in terms of regarding the park itself. So at the moment, the park last winter, the winter just gone, went through what the council called environmental enhancement works, which was essentially to move the burn to create the space for the whatever it is they want to build in the park. That happened in the winter, but it wasn't. The park can recover from that. So we're waiting now for the next phase of any planning application to come in, which may then decide that may then result in the park being built on and partially destroyed. However, the campaign has we've got a legal team which are looking into it in terms of there's quite complex like land tenure issues around who owns the park. So it's not 100% clear who owns the park. So at the moment, the council claim they own the park, but actually we've got evidence to suggest that the park or even a significant part of the park is owned in trust, which is if you watch the play next year, you see a little bit of it. Hopefully, watch the play next year, you see a little bit of it playing out. But the other interesting thing about the play is that the story continues to evolve. So we may have to obviously rewrite some of it if it gets shown next year as well. So
yeah, I would just say that
the park we're hopeful still with the park.
Yeah. I think that also speaks to the thing that we have. The script is in continuous development, really, because as the story unfolds and develops. But how we also do that without just making it like and another thing and another thing, to also protect people's experience in Torry as well. But so like how we kind of like hold and frame that. Has been really important. Yeah. Thanks, Scott. And thanks, Robin. Chrissy?
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear that the script's in continuous development, because that really speaks to that responsibility bit, I think, in terms of it being genuinely connected to the place. I was interested just to hear, like you've said a little bit about, oh yeah, there was 5 community performers. It's just interested to hear, I've got this kind of vision of all these people interacting with your process in some way, and like, where did you present it, and like, have they all seen it, and did you get policymakers along? Did you get sort of, who did you get along beyond those community members? So yeah, just a little bit of widening of that picture of who's seen and their response, the community, the people who are not in it but have contributed to like their response and stuff would be lovely to hear a wee bit.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you. That's a really good question. And I will on the next slide as well, on the last, like, I think we've got a link to, pardon me, the A Play for Torry website where there's the video and you get a bit of a flavour of what it looks like, feels like from the performances. So in January, we performed a play in Aberdeen Arts Centre, and we performed it in the golf club in Torry that overlooks the harbour. Well, overlooks Torry, overlooks everything, which was really important space for us to do it in as well. And yeah, we did invite some policymakers. I don't know. Maybe Scott can speak to whether he knows whether that many came. We had so I'd say, just to rewind from that when we first developed a script in 2025, in March 2025, we had a big community kind of feedback sharing reading session, and shared it with people in other ways as well, in order to gather their kind of responses in order to develop it to where we got it to. Then we had, in the developing for performance, we had 5 community performers and 5 professional performers, which was a really amazing mix as well. And we had the community performers were in less time than the professional performers, who had 8 days of rehearsal. But these moments were really geared around around their relational interactions as well, and building their kind of relationship of the entire company. Those performers were all people who had been really involved throughout. Their stories were part of the show, and they've been involved throughout. And had very much were co-owners of the project. And so very much we're also in the position of sort of like welcoming in the new professional cast when we cast them, which was a really wonderful dynamic to have there. And there was a lot of respect each way for the actors who were coming in to perform the multiple roles, and also the people who are sharing their direct experience and have been holding and been part of this project, as well as campaigning and being part of these different roles. We had, I think, almost everyone whose words were in it came to see the play. I'd say the response was, maybe Scott, you can speak a little bit to it, but I mean, it was quite overwhelming. Yeah, there was I think I could sum it up with that the play opens itself with a quote from the first person we went to interview when we first started the process, who had said, So you want to make a play about Torry? Well, I'll tell you now, lots of people have had a square go at this, and it failed. Won't work in Torry, were his words. Um, and he came to see the he came to see the play, and he was profuse about the about kind of particularly about lots of elements of it, but also about capturing the complexity in Torry as well. I think that, yeah, quite rightly, his criticism was around also how often things would either be painted in one way or another. Either it's painted as a like, as we know how negatively like working class communities can get painted, but also, you know, otherwise also this rosy aspect that can happen in the opposite. So I think he was celebrating the complexity that was managed to be captured, which was really great to hear. Scott, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to say we had one MSP was at one of the performances, and we invited other like politicians, particularly the MPs, MSPs. The councillors was a bit tricky. We didn't obviously councillors were free to come to the play, but in Torry, the council at the moment it would have been tricky for us to invite councillors because they might have been met with some degree of hostility. But that obviously, if we tour it, then there may be and play it in performance next year, there could be other opportunities to do that, because I think it is important that people who perhaps have made decisions in the past, which is not seen to benefit the community, see it in a way. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Madeline.
Yeah, I was really drawn to those questions that you shared just before the breakout rooms about like whose voice gets heard and who's taken decisions. And some of them were like bigger conceptual questions that you just carry with you. But I imagine some of them had really specific answers that emerged through the process. And you said something and you started to answer it, I think, also in your last answer there. But for those questions like who takes the choices and whose voice isn't in the room and things like that, and you mentioned care in as your way of dealing with that, could you explain more about what that looked like when the answers emerged and there was a very clear like this is the point and this is who's doing it? How did you sort of navigate that in the bigger process?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for bringing us back to that point. Yeah, I would say there's a couple of examples I'd give. Like one thing I'd say is I think within the power of the writer's room, as it were. So, myself, Scott being present, and Shane and May as the Aberdeen-based writers, holding responsibility of these stories. I think we paid particular attention to after when we get excited through the theatre making process of the difficult, what felt difficult, and what felt like uncomfortable, and then spent time kind of trying to go into those moments and be like, was this because this doesn't ring true to a particular person, or this isn't or like what that thing is that they say is quite uncomfortable. And then some of the time that was then going back to an individual, and yeah, so going back to ensure how so I guess, and this is also where I guess the interpersonal relationships with people were quite important, was obviously to be able to kind of speak to someone and be like check about how something's being interpreted or might be seen, and if they're happy around that with their story. So that happened a couple of times, I think, in like us taking things directly back. Other times it was like, okay, we're actually going to take these words out. We're going to use our authorship. That actually we don't need to have this frame in there, or like how can we, a big tenant also was also like, well, obviously, we're working with verbatim, it's people's real stories, but also where can we do show me, don't tell me about this? If we want to express this, like a dynamic that's going on, how can we do that without having to use words which might be quite incendiary, or something, or like, yeah, where can we use that? Where can we use our practice of getting to make theatre to do that instead of having to use some words.
Emer, sorry, yeah. I was going to just say about like, in one way, what guided it was like when me and Emer first sat down to try to think about, like, right at the beginning when we decided we wanted to make it, we decided to like come up with certain principles that we wanted the play to do. And one of the things which I wanted to bring in, and this is from my own observation of what was happening in Torry, is often the bad things, what happened in the community, are often seen as a result of individuals making bad decisions or poor decisions. And so what we wanted the play to do is to show that it goes beyond these individual councillors or the oil tycoon Ian Wood making these decisions. And so when we then decided particularly how to tell that aspect of the story, we wanted to show that it wasn't necessarily the individual. It was part, I guess, like more of a systemic issue which is going on. And I think that helped guide us what to include and not to include and there's obviously a political aspect to that, like that's how. But I don't think I think we was always quite transparent about that, and I think the play's quite transparent about that as well.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. It's really important. Yeah, that kind of this is a tip of the iceberg, or like this bit represents something, a system much bigger, was a really important principle for guiding that. And I think that combined with also when we are doing like something where maybe we're being, showing something uncomfortable, or like how, it's also trying to treat that respectfully but joyfully as well. Yeah. I hope that answered the question a bit. Yeah, Robin.
Just a very quick one, which is, where and how do you think we could see the play? Is there plans to tour, or do you think is there snippets available anywhere?
There is on this very next screen, there is which is actually quite timely, if I will. You can watch a little video of on the Play for Torry website of the flavour of it. But yeah, we're currently in developing our touring fund, Creative Scotland touring fund bid to hopefully tour it next 2027, and that will be across Scotland as well, in a series of like 7 or 8 places. So hopefully that'll be you'll get to see it in there. But yeah, please do. There's a Play for Torry websites on here, and also the Friends of St Vincent's Park as well. And I think these slides are going to be shared around afterwards. But yeah, that also just leads us to say, thank you so much for having us on this spotlight, and for this conversation, and for your participation in it as well. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So I'm just going to pop some links in the chat. Here are the ITAC links, and I've just copied from your slides there the links here on the slides just for the chat as well. I'll just say a very, very massive thank you to Emer and Scott for hosting our first Spotlight on Scotland series. Thank you so much. And a thank you to all of you for joining. These sessions, like I say, they happen every month. We have another one next month. It's also up on the members platform. You will also have had invitations to join, so please do. And our third and final session on the Spotlight on Scotland series will be in September. And that will be after we've all met, hopefully in Belgium, for ITAC 8. So there's a brief pause in August because we have our conference and there will be online stuff to do with that, but we'll come back in September to wrap up the series. We are a very Scottish call today, so it's really, really nice to see you and thank you for joining. And if you want to have colleagues invite people along, please do. Being a member of ITAC is free. We do not charge teaching artists to be part of it. And so if you sign up, you are very, very welcome, but you'll also get all of those invitations to the future events as they come out. A big thank you to Creative Scotland and Chrissy for partnering with us on this series. Chrissy, is there any final words you want to say from your side?
No, just again, thanks to everybody. Thanks to Emer and thanks to Scott and Madeline. Thank you as well. And yeah, we look forward to seeing, obviously this is recorded so we can share it more widely. Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of people will pick up on it. It's been a really nuanced conversation, and I think that's part of the great thing about having a longer conversation and allowing a bit of time. So yeah, thank you, everybody.
Great. So with that being said, I'll end the call. You'll get an automated email afterwards reminding you all the key links about where to go to the forum, but that's where you'll find the slides for today. It's where we can post any links, but also if people watch it back in a different time zone and want to ask questions, that's where they'll post them as well. So lovely to see you all. Thank you so much. And I'll close us off there. Thank you, Emer. Thank you, Scott.
Thanks so much.